I'm 78 years old, and I want to tell you something about inflammation that your doctor probably never explained. Not because they don't care, but because medicine was never designed to teach you what ginger actually does inside the human body at the molecular level. Most people think inflammation is the enemy. They think it's the fire they need to put out. They take ibuprofen, they ice their joints, they try to suppress it, but that's the surface understanding. That's where the conversation usually stops. And stopping there is one of the most costly mistakes a person can make with their health. Inflammation, at its root, is not a disease, it is a signal. It is your body's most ancient communication system telling you that something needs attention. The problem is never the inflammation itself. The problem is when that signal gets stuck on, when the alarm keeps ringing and nobody answers the door. That's what the medical world calls chronic systemic inflammation. And it is the silent engine running underneath almost every major disease we fear: heart disease, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, arthritis, even certain cancers. Not caused by one moment, but built slowly, quietly, over years of an immune system that never got the message to stand down. And here's what most people miss. The reason that signal gets stuck on is almost always rooted in the gut. Not the joints, not the blood vessels, the gut. Because 70% of your immune system lives in your gastrointestinal tract. The lining of your intestines, when healthy, is a filter. It lets nutrients through and keeps harmful compounds out. But when that lining becomes compromised, something researchers now call intestinal permeability, fragments of bacteria, undigested food particles, and inflammatory compounds begin leaking into the bloodstream. Your immune system, encountering these foreign invaders around the clock, never gets a break. It stays activated. And a chronically activated immune system eventually begins attacking things it shouldn't. This is where ginger enters. Not as a spice, not as a folk remedy, but as one of the most pharmacologically complex roots the earth has ever produced. The rhizome of Zingiber officinale contains over 400 distinct chemical compounds. But the ones that matter most for inflammation are a class of molecules called gingerols and their heat-transformed cousins, shogols. When you consume fresh ginger steeped in hot water, you're releasing both. And what these molecules do inside the body is nothing short of remarkable when you understand the mechanism. Not just the outcome, but the actual mechanism. Gingerols are natural COX-2 inhibitors. COX-2, cyclooxygenase 2, is an enzyme your body uses to produce prostaglandins, which are signaling molecules that drive inflammatory responses, pain, and fever. Pharmaceutical NSAIDs like ibuprofen and naproxen work by blocking this same enzyme. Ginger does it too, through a different pathway, without the gastrointestinal damage that synthetic inhibitors cause. In fact, while pharmaceutical COX-2 inhibitors can degrade the stomach lining over time, ginger simultaneously protects it. It stimulates the production of mucin, the protective coating of the gut wall. It increases blood flow to the gastric lining. It actively supports the integrity of the very barrier whose breakdown is driving systemic inflammation in the first place. But it goes even deeper than that. Shogols, which form when gingerols are dehydrated through heat, have been shown to inhibit NF-κB, which is one of the most critical master regulators of inflammation in the human body. NF-κB is a protein complex that sits inside your cells and acts like an on switch for hundreds of inflammatory genes. When something stresses the cell, a toxin, an infection, an oxidative molecule, NF-κB activates, travels to the nucleus, and turns on genes that produce cytokines, the chemical messengers of inflammation. This is necessary in acute situations. But in chronic, low-grade inflammation, NF-κB stays activated, constantly flooding the body with cytokines like IL-6, TNF-alpha, and IL-1 beta, the same cytokines elevated in people with arthritis, metabolic syndrome, and cardiovascular disease. Shogols block the signal that would otherwise activate NF-κB. They interrupt the chain at the cellular level before the inflammatory cascade even begins. This is not symptomatic relief. This is upstream intervention. This is working at the source. And the real power is in what happens when this becomes daily. When you steep ginger in near boiling water every morning, not just once, not as a supplement in a capsule, but as a living, warm, bioavailable ritual repeated day after day, you're doing something that a single dose can never accomplish. You are gradually shifting the baseline of your immune system's reactivity. You are, over time, reducing what researchers call the inflammatory set point. The body learns, through consistent biochemical input, that it does not need to stay at high alert. This is why duration matters. A week of ginger tea produces measurable antioxidant effects. A month produces detectable reductions in C-reactive proteins, which is one of the most reliable blood markers of systemic inflammation. A year produces changes in the gut microbiome that compound everything else, because ginger is also a prebiotic, meaning it feeds the beneficial bacteria in your intestines, the same bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, which directly regulate immune function and reduce intestinal permeability. You're not just reducing inflammation, you're rebuilding the environment that made it chronic to begin with. Most people miss this because they want the single cause, the single cure. They want to know what to take and for how long, but the body doesn't work in courses, it works in patterns. And ginger works with that truth rather than against it. There's something else people don't understand about the relationship between ginger and pain, specifically joint pain. When someone says their arthritis improved after drinking ginger tea, the typical skeptic says that's placebo, that's coincidence. But the research disagrees in ways that are worth understanding in detail. A landmark study published in Arthritis and Rheumatism gave patients with osteoarthritis of the knee either a ginger extract or placebo over 6 weeks. 63% of the ginger group reported significant reduction in knee pain on standing compared to 50% in the placebo group. More importantly, when the study ended and patients were crossed over, the effects in the ginger group persisted longer. The anti-inflammatory action had accumulated. It had not merely masked the pain, it had begun to reduce the underlying tissue inflammation driving it. That accumulation is the key concept. Gingerols and shogaols are fat soluble, which means they integrate in the cell membranes. They don't just pass through the bloodstream and get excreted. They embed themselves in the lipid layers of cells and continue exerting their effects between doses. This is why consistency produces results that single doses cannot. This is why 40 years looks so different from 40 days. And here's what almost no one talks about: the connection between ginger, cortisol, and the nervous system. Chronic inflammation and chronic stress are not separate problems. They are two expressions of the same dysregulation. Elevated cortisol, the hormone released by the adrenal glands during stress, directly activates the NF-κB pathway. Chronic psychological stress is, biochemically, an inflammatory condition. The mind-body division is a fiction the body never agreed to. Ginger contains compounds, specifically 6-paradol and certain volatile oils, that have been shown to modulate the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal system that governs cortisol release. Drinking warm ginger tea in the morning is not just delivering bioactive compounds. The warmth itself activates the vagus nerve, the great highway between the gut and the brain, which has a profound anti-inflammatory effect through what researchers call the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway. The ritual is doing biochemical work that the compounds alone cannot do. This is the hidden layer most people never reach. The understanding that how you consume something shapes what it does. Ginger swallowed as a cold capsule while rushing out the door is a different intervention than ginger steeped slowly in hot water, held in both hands, consumed in the quiet of early morning before the stress of the day begins. The nervous system state you are in while absorbing any compound affects how that compound is metabolized. A calm, parasympathetically dominant state increases gut blood flow, enhances nutrient absorption, and reduces the cortisol that would otherwise compete with ginger's anti-inflammatory action. The practice and the plant are inseparable if you want the full effect. Now let's connect this to practical application, because depth without direction is just information. If you want to use ginger the way the research actually supports, not the watered-down version sold in tea bags at the grocery store, you need fresh root. You need a thumb-sized piece, about 10 to 15 grams, sliced thin or grated, steeped in 2 cups of water that is just stopped boiling for 10 to 15 minutes covered. Covering matters. Volatile compounds evaporate with steam, and you want those compounds in the liquid, not in the air. A squeeze of lemon at the end increases the bioavailability of the antioxidants through a process involving pH and polyphenol stability. A small amount of black pepper, even a single crack, contains piperine, which increases the absorption of fat-soluble compounds by up to 60%. These are not folk additions, they are biochemically rational enhancements. Drink it in the morning before food, not because of superstition, but because on an empty stomach the compounds reach the intestinal lining first, before digestive activity dilutes or compartmentalizes them. Within 30 minutes, gingerols are detectable in the bloodstream. Within an hour, Antioxidant capacity in the blood is measurably elevated. This is happening whether you feel it or not. And over weeks and months, the cumulative effect is a body that is systematically less inflamed, a gut that is more protected, an immune system that is better regulated, and joints that are bathed in fewer inflammatory mediators with every single day. The body is not a machine that breaks down at a fixed rate determined at birth. It is a system that responds constantly, intelligently, and specifically to the inputs it receives. Every morning that you choose this practice, you are casting a vote for a different biological future. Not a dramatic intervention, not a pharmaceutical override, a consistent, intelligent signal that speaks directly to the ancient chemistry of your cells in a language they were always designed to receive. There's another dimension of this that modern science is only beginning to map, and it has to do with the brain. Neuroinflammation is now understood to be a primary driver of cognitive decline, depression, and neurodegenerative disease. When systemic inflammation is chronically elevated, inflammatory cytokines cross the blood-brain barrier and trigger microglial activation, the brain's version of an immune response. Chronically activated microglia begin damaging neurons rather than protecting them. This is implicated in Alzheimer's disease and in the kind of low-grade depression that doesn't respond well to antidepressants because that depression was never purely a serotonin problem. It was, at least in part, an inflammatory problem. Ginger crosses the blood-brain barrier. Its bioactive compounds reduce microglial activation, decrease neuroinflammatory markers, and protect neurons from oxidative damage. They also enhance the expression of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, which supports the growth and maintenance of neural connections. A brain that is less inflamed and better nourished at the cellular level is a brain that thinks more clearly, remembers more accurately, and ages more slowly. This is not a peripheral benefit. For anyone over 50, this may be the most important effect of all. And there is still another layer beneath this, one that connects ginger to the fundamental biology of aging itself. Aging at the cellular level is largely a story of accumulated oxidative damage. Free radicals attack cellular structures including DNA, proteins, and the mitochondria that produce cellular energy. When inflammation is chronic, the demand for antioxidant defense outpaces the supply. Cells age faster, tissues degrade. Ginger's antioxidant profile is exceptionally broad. It doesn't just donate electrons to neutralize free radicals, it also upregulates the body's own antioxidant production through a signaling pathway called NRF2. When gingerols and shogals activate NRF2, they trigger the cell's own genetic machinery to produce more superoxide dismutase, more catalase, more glutathione. You are not just adding antioxidants from the outside, you're amplifying the body's internal antioxidant systems, which is fundamentally different from simply consuming supplements, because it works with the body's regulatory intelligence rather than trying to replace it. This is the principle that underlies everything I have been describing. Ginger does not override the body. It does not suppress symptoms while leaving causes untouched. It speaks to the body's existing regulatory systems in their own language. It signals through real biochemical pathways that your cells have been responding to for thousands of years of evolutionary history. This is why it works, and this is why it works better over time rather than worse. Because the body is learning from the input, integrating it, adjusting its baseline in response to a consistent signal it recognizes as beneficial. This is also why it cannot be reduced to a pill. Pharmaceuticals are designed to be powerful in isolation, to produce measurable effects in controlled trials with single variables. That is appropriate for acute intervention. But for the long, slow work of reducing chronic inflammation and supporting healthy aging, the context of consumption, the consistency of delivery, the synergy of compounds working together as a whole food, these things matter enormously. A standardized extract in a capsule is not the same thing as a living root steeped in hot water and consumed as part of a morning practice. One isolates a mechanism, the other is a conversation with biology in its full complexity. So, when you ask what 40 years of ginger tea has actually done, this is the answer. Not one thing, not inflammation alone, a gradual compounding recalibration of the systems that govern how the body regulates itself, a persistent signal to the immune system that it is safe to stand down, a daily act of protection for the gut lining that is the foundation of immune function, a steady supply of compounds that protect the brain, support the mitochondria, upregulate the body's own antioxidant defenses, and modulate the stress response that would otherwise keep the inflammatory engine running. That is what 40 years teaches you. Not that ginger is magic, but that the body, given the right conditions consistently over time, has a profound capacity to return toward balance. The science now exists to explain exactly why this is true, in detail that would have seemed extraordinary even 20 years ago. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can ever do for your health is something so ancient, so simple, and so close that most people walk right past it every single day without stopping to understand what it is actually capable of.